One. And we are live. We'll be starting in 2 minutes. I'm going to see if I can change over my device so that I can be seen. So I hope I can do that in a minute.
So Nathaniel, we're live. We're currently live.
Yes, but there's a 30-second delay.
Hey, Dr. Wheatley, how you doing?
Hey, Chris, what's up, man? Long time.
Life is good. Can't complain.
I have to give God thanks, you know?
Same.
Afternoon, Doc. Good to see you.
Hey, Ryan, man. Good to see you, my boy. Yeah, man. I was just listening to what Chris said to you earlier. Love what you're doing, man. Looking good, you know? I like how you represent not only G2K and yourself, but generally the government in terms of articulating some policy positions. And, you know, you guys are really doing well. We are very proud of G2K. I must state that from the secretariat perspective that. Hey, Ryan, man. Good to see you, my boy. Yeah, man. I was just listening.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. We're trying our best. Thank you so much. To play our part.
Greetings, everyone.
Nathaniel, we're getting some feedback from your end.
Still getting feedback?
No, it's better now. All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cheyenne Hilton, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as one of the moderators for this afternoon's proceedings. I will be later joined by my co-moderator, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Generation 2000, Mr. Nathaniel Amor. And Mr. Amor and his committee, they have put together an exciting discussion for us today. And at this time, I would like to kickstart into things by welcoming our president, Mr. Ryan Strong, to do welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ryan Strong, President of Generation 2000, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session which put on by G2K's Foreign Affairs Committee. I'd like to extend special welcomes to our panelists today, Dr. Wheatley, Chris Record, and all our other panelists for taking the time. I thank you for the time taken to be with us today. The truth is, as we move into a more digitized Jamaica, which is evidenced by the fact that today we are in the midst of a lockdown where persons are at home unless essential, but business continues. The truth is data protection is of paramount importance. Increased pressure has been placed on our credit cards for e-commerce, the data we submit when completing online forms and related matters. As such, we thought it important to highlight this and to speak to some of the best practices, some of the new normals, some of the realities in the space. We invite you to join us today, the 25th and the 27th, Wednesday and Friday. I heard it said we are lockdown compliant, so you have no excuse to not be here and to take notes. And we are thrilled to have you with us. We wish you a productive time. Look forward to contributing to our society positively. So thank you again for your time with us, panelists. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to learning as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Strong. So just to add to that, for those of you who are just joining us, my name is Cheyenne Hilton. I am one of the moderators for this afternoon. And I just want to welcome you guys to our first part in our three-part series of our Data Protection and International Relations Symposium. And without further ado, I guess we shall kickstart our event. So at this time, I'd like to welcome committee member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Ms. Kadian McNeil, to introduce our first speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Andrew Wheatley. Dr. Wheatley attended the University of the West Indies, Ferry View A&M in Texas, USA, and Imperial College at the University of London in England. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Biochemistry and Chemistry, along with a doctorate in Basic Medicine. He is a senior lecturer in Basic Medicine and a research scientist at the University of the West Indies. His work includes studies in the areas of diabetes management, genetic engineering against disease and stress conditions, treatment of cocaine addiction, hypercholesteremia, pharmaceutical properties of indigenous materials, and tissue culturing. Dr. Wheatley has served as the Minister of Science, Energy and Technology, and he tabled the Data Protection Bill and initially chaired the Joint Select Committee of Parliament, which was established to examine the bill. Welcome, Dr. Wheatley.
Thank you very much, Kadian, for that introduction. Let me just use this opportunity to say how pleased we are with the Generation 2000, that group of young professionals who have been working diligently behind the scenes and also out there in front, leading from the front as the future of our country. Let me also recognize quickly the president of G2K, Ryan, and other members of his team, Nathaniel, who is the chair of this committee that organized this symposium. Of course, Cheyenne, yourself, Kadian, you have Kia Ferguson, and other members of the G2K team who have worked assiduously to ensure that we can have this symposium this afternoon. I want to also make special mention of my colleagues and some of us have been working together for some time now, other members of the panel, Chris Record, Andrew Nooks, and let me say welcome as well to Mr. Khan, Andreas Khan, this afternoon. Let me also say a pleasant good afternoon to those persons watching or listening to the streaming of this symposium. Now, you know, I listened to the introduction earlier, Kadian, and you know, something jumped out at me in my own bio, being a genetic engineer. And you know, I asked myself a question immediately: what am I doing in this symposium? I should be speaking about genetic engineering and also more about the COVID-19 vaccine. But the reality is that we all have to adapt to the digital age that we are in, and we have to embrace ICT as an enabler of our society. And so I am very pleased to be here this afternoon to give a very small presentation, a short presentation, entitled The Importance of Cybersecurity and Data Protection Mechanisms. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the world we now live in has gotten a serious reality check over the last couple of months. In fact, over a year now, we have been living with this reality check in the form of the pandemic, COVID-19. It has forced us to reassess how we do even the most basic of things. But among many other things, it has greatly increased our reliance on technology. And ladies and gentlemen, it has demonstrated to all of us, those who were reluctant or resistant to change, what is truly possible with technology as an enabler. COVID-19 has also brought to the fore more discussions about digital transformation and the advent of the digital society. Now, Jamaica started its journey down this path. And I must say that despite the many challenges that we have faced, we are not doing too badly. We still have some ways to go. And when I say we're not doing too badly, I just want to just give us an idea as to some of our accomplishments or what we have done to date, that has allowed me to come to this conclusion. We have in place quite a bit of legislation. Some of them we are currently updating to ensure that they are relevant to the time. And I just want to mention at least 4 or 5 such legislation that we have in place that I believe has put us on the right path. We have the Telecommunication Act, and I know some of us who are familiar with this act will say that this bit of this piece of legislation is really outdated, and I must agree, and it is in need of review. And I do hope that shortly we will start the process of reviewing this Telecommunication Act because it's a critical piece of legislation. The Electronic Transaction Act. This is a very critical piece of legislation. It facilitates e-commerce and also give, support to the use of digital signatures and other things of that nature. The Cybercrimes Act, that act was passed some time ago and is being reviewed as we speak. That act needs to be updated to capture the current state of the industry, because we are seeing where cybercrimes have become so exotic and sophisticated that the current legislation that we have as relates to the Cybercrimes Act needs to be in line with the current realities. The Data Protection Act, which was passed recently and will go into effect in 2022, is another piece of legislation, critical piece of legislation. And currently we are examining and deliberating on the National Identification and Registration Act, the NIDS Act. And coming out of these acts, we have developed quite a number of policies. We have the Vision 2030 plan, and I think now, seeing that we are in the middle or the latter half of 2021, that we will have to revisit the policy as relates to our Vision 2030, and in particular, the ICT sector plan. We have, of course, the ICT policy of 2011. Again, work needs to be done in that regard. And of course, the National Cybersecurity Policy of 2015. And these are just a few of the legislations and policies that we have. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have many of the dots. Honestly speaking, we have many of the dots. but it is important to understand what a digital society looks like and what are the key underpinnings if we want to connect all these dots and ultimately craft what is our vision of a Jamaica that as a fully developed digital society. And this is what will allow us, ladies and gentlemen, to firmly stake our claim in the digital global marketplace. Now, the question is, what are the components of the digital society? And right, Nathaniel, I do hope that you have put on the screen that slide that I asked you guys to put up for me.
We're getting it up right now. We're getting it up.
Okay, so there are 9 key ingredients that are important to the facilitation and success of any digital society. And if I should say, citizenship in such a society.
Ow.
Is it up yet, Nathaniel?
I'm waiting for Zoom to allow the screen to share.
And I think we should just press on.
I'll go ahead and you can follow when it is up. But yes, here it is. Yeah, so there are 9 key ingredients or components that we believe are critical to the facilitation and the ultimate success of any digital society, and of course, the citizenship in such a society. The first one is digital access. And that more or less speaks to the equitable distribution of technology and online services or resources. The second one is digital commerce. And I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with that. You know, we have now gone full speed ahead in terms of using online services, electronic services to do business, especially shopping. So digital commerce facilitates electronic buying and selling of goods and safeguards to really assist those who are participating in that space, those persons buying, selling, banking, or using money in any way in that digital space. The other component is digital communication. And digital communication is not only about using WhatsApp or social media or TikTok. You know, digital communication, especially now when this pandemic has moved beyond social media and speaks more to electronic exchange and sharing of information and data. The fourth component, digital literacy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, in the midst of the pandemic, it has come to the fore that digital literacy is more than important. I mean, a lot of us in the past would have just, I mean, saw it as something for the techies. Now we are seeing that digital literacy has now crept into all facets of our lives, every sector of our society. And digital literacy is the process really of understanding technology and its use. The better educated or digitally literate one is, the more likely the more likely we are going to make, correct or very good decisions online. The digital law, that's another critical component. You know, we spoke about some of the rules earlier, the policies and the legislation. So digital law, the electronic responsibility for actions and deeds, and again, that comes with under the Cyber Crimes and even the Data Protection Act, that responsibility that one must have as relates to is our actions and deeds, and of course the creation of rules and policies that addresses issues related to the digital space. Digital etiquette, that's the sixth component. Now, electronic standards of conduct or procedures and the process of thinking about others when using digital devices is very critical. You can smear, you can send false information that can lead to even death of persons. And so one has to appreciate the responsibility that one must have when you're operating in this space. And so digital etiquette is a critical component if you want to build out a safe digital society. Digital wellness and health, that's the seventh component or ingredient that we believe is critical to the success of any digital society and participation in such a society. Physical and psychological well-being in a digital world is very critical. You know, a lot of us suffer from mental illnesses, and it's not just because of the stresses of life in your workplace, but sometimes you will see things online that can have psychological impact on one's thinking and well-being. And so that is a critical component as well. The eighth one is the digital rights and responsibilities. That is a requirement and freedom extended to everyone in a digital world. And that is something that we as a society in Jamaica needs to build out. I mean, prior to the 2016 election, we had developed a 10-point ICT plan that spoke to the building out of a digital society and ensuring that we attain universal access. And I must say that, you know, in the first 100 days of being in office, we as a government were able to achieve at least 3 to 4 of these 10 points that we made a commitment to achieving. I mean, universal access was a critical one that we were able to achieve with the assistance of the telecoms, in particular Digicel, and later on Flow, where all government websites were 0 rated, especially now. You know, it is critical for the government websites to be 0 rated, so persons without a data plan can still have access to critical government services, and in particular students, you know, having access to the information that is stored on the Ministry of Health website, especially learning material. That is a very critical piece of work that was done there. The ninth one, and I'm sure a lot of us here are very much concerned about this component, digital security and privacy. And ladies and gentlemen, the electronic precautions basically is what is guaranteed under this component, digital security and privacy. All of us want to feel safe using the internet and using online services. We want to ensure that our information, our privacy is still protected, and that is why this is a very critical component. And I believe, you know, why persons are hesitant to embrace fully the digital society is that level of skepticism as relates to one's data. How is it being treated? You know, is it being sold to other third parties just to make some money without any consideration as to one's privacy and security? So, ladies and gentlemen, those are basically the 9 ingredients or components that we believe are critical to the building out of a digital society. Now, regardless of which one of these elements you look at, it is quite clear, or should be clear, that cybersecurity and data protection plays a critical role in every single one of these components. You know, from access to data networks and the data flowing across them when conducting electronic transactions online, to the sharing of data and digital content during learning experiences or remote business collaboration, you know, whether it's the work from home or some person working in the office, you know, that is very critical. Again, that was also one of our points in the ICT plan leading up to the 2016 election. The work from home initiative, we termed it then as e-home. And I believe that, you know, this pandemic has forced us to embrace that even before we have put in place all the necessary infrastructure to fully support and the e-home component. So all these activities, ladies and gentlemen, are inextricably tied to a need for and of course keen awareness of security and protection. In addition to this, ladies and gentlemen, if we as a country, as a society, are really to demonstrate to the rest of the world our capacity to participate, compete, instill business investment confidence in the global digital marketplace as a digital society, cybersecurity and data protection are critical. You know, the question will be asked, what are some of the risks of going digital? Now, when we talk about the mechanisms that must be in place for cybersecurity and data protection, it is important for us to recognize that it cannot be business as usual in the journey to the digital realm. You know, awareness of these critical elements, ladies and gentlemen, have to be infused into every aspect of our daily lives. Almost like the vaccine, you know, where we are right now, that it is critical for the vaccine to be infused in our system to offer some level of protection and reduce hospitalization and even death. You know, but I do not want us to think about it in the way people feel things are going right now. But we need to understand what it is actually all about. We have to weave this appreciation of cybersecurity and data protection into our curricula in schools, at least from the primary level. Every citizen must be made aware of his or her responsibilities, rights, and recourse. This is what the data protection legislation and cybercrimes laws provide for us. We have also a detailed national cybersecurity strategy, and it is being reviewed. That's also set out key pillars for success at building out a sound security posture. But ladies and gentlemen, we have to be diligent at ensuring that we execute and enforce what these laws and policies prescribe. We have seen how cyber attacks have debilitated effects on economic activities in recent months all over the world. The current financial situation cannot escape us. The colonial pipeline issue, and of course, solar winds. Now, the colonial pipeline is the main supplier of just over 45% of the fuel to the east coast of the United States of America, including gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. Well, now, when it was attacked, it resulted in gasoline shortage for about 1 week, at least a week in a number of states within the US. With fuel prices skyrocketing to over $3 per gallon in some states. The solar winds attack had a debilitating effect on many key US government entities, including the Departments of State, Defense, Treasury, and Homeland Security. Now, each of these, ladies and gentlemen, each of these attacks cost the US billions of dollars in a matter of days, billions of dollars in a matter of days. And of course, there's still continuing costs to recover over the months thereafter. Global losses from cyber attack in 2020 alone reached nearly US $1 trillion. Now for 2021, the losses are projected to be in the area of close to $6 trillion. In Jamaica alone, 5 years ago, when we came into office, we reported losses to cybercrime at around US $100 million. And I am afraid to think where we are right now. But you can do the maths, and I want us to just think about it for a second and let this thing sink in for a bit. It is really something that we must tackle as a society, as a country, if you want to, and put the necessary safeguards in place if you want to participate in the digital space. Now, the challenge many nation states face is that the majority of what is called critical infrastructure, such as water, power, telecommunications, and so on, is privately owned, not necessarily in Jamaica, but in a number of other jurisdictions, especially developed countries. And as such, we have to ensure that these assets, especially those that are here in Jamaica, are properly secured, not only to provide the needed services, but because they are also storing sensitive data on citizens as well. We know, for example, any one of our utility company, you will have to give them certain information or access to information. The banks as well, they will have, some amount of personal data. And it is very critical for us that we are offered some level of security and privacy, and the Data Protection Act speaks to that. So one can easily see why systems for cybersecurity and also cyber defense, along with data protection, are so important for us as a society. Now, I've been talking about a digital society and a digital society policy. And that's the last piece I'm going to speak on this afternoon. I want to just add that we must go further than just, talk about it and move beyond where we are now as a country. Earlier I mentioned that we must craft what our own digital society should look like. That is something that as a government, we need to have that level of engagement with all the stakeholders to ensure that we build out that digital society. That is something that is lacking here in Jamaica, and we have to spend some time on that. As I said earlier, we have done well in creating the dots, but we have not fully connected them as yet, and that is critical. And that is why, I'm going back to this point that we need to develop a comprehensive digital society policy. Such a policy, I believe, will provide the roadmap and framework for achieving the digital society we desire. It will galvanize efforts and funding needed to achieve the desired outcomes. Unfortunately, as I stated earlier, we do not have that policy. But for our country and our citizens to realize the full benefits of efforts that we have made up to this point, we must start to work and connecting these dots. We have a very fantastic lineup over the next couple of days. And I am sure that the colleague panelists will speak more to this and looking at it from a number of different perspectives. And I just want to say a fantastic job to you guys at G2K for putting on this symposium, and look forward to the entertaining and constructive discussion at the end of the presentations. Thank you very much.
We thank you for your presentation, Dr. Wheatley. It was definitely appreciated. It was interesting to hear the government's perspective on all things data protection and cybersecurity. And I'm just letting everyone know that to the viewers at home, if you have any questions that you might want to ask any of the panelists, just asking you all to get them together, send them to our YouTube channel. You can also tag the G2K pages on Instagram and Twitter, and we will try to see if we can ask the speakers those questions. So I am back. I'm physically here now. Had some technical difficulties, but we're here. We're up and going, ready to go. And I will be asking Miss Catherine Smith to introduce our next speaker, who is coming from very far. They didn't have to take a plane ticket to get here, but we're definitely looking forward to their international perspective on things. So Catherine, carry us to the next stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be able to introduce Mr. Androsh Khan. Now, Androsh Khan has been working for Microsoft for over 2 decades. He's been very closely involved in various Microsoft internal programs that are related to data protection and data privacy topics. He has extensive practical knowledge on how large global complex organizations are dealing with the complex regulatory landscape surrounding both data privacy as well as cybersecurity. Based out of Switzerland, he is very passionate about this topic and has been participating in various events and online symposiums to advocate the importance of data protection and data privacy. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Androsh Khan.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and very good afternoon to everybody in the beautiful island of Jamaica. I've never been there, to be honest, but I'm a very passionate fan of cricket, amongst other things. So I follow your CPL, and that's my tangent there. I personally live in a very small country in Europe called Switzerland. We are quite famous for mountains, lakes, cheese, chocolates, as well as good data privacy and data protection standards. Swiss banks have been renowned to be able to hold these tight. And it is my pleasure, absolutely, to participate here in this symposium. So I thank you for inviting me for this. I would like to just, over the next 10 to 15 minutes, speak about 3 key points. Firstly, talk about a little bit about my experience in this realm, then to give you perhaps a more global perspective, a European focused perspective on why cybersecurity, data protection is important. And lastly, I'd like to spend some time on giving some advice to the Jamaican organizations who handle sensitive data and who would be interested in trading goods or services or products, solutions on an international level, especially in the whole European continent, as well as Asia or the US. We can talk about any region. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm actually responsible for a portfolio of technologies surrounding the realms of data protection, data privacy, security, from a sales perspective. So I have a commercial role in one of my hats. And I'm responsible for the largest accounts that we have in Switzerland. We call them global accounts. One of them is a company that does business in all countries of the world, except North Korea. It's a company called Nestle. I believe in your country, you would also have products from them. Then I'm also the regional community lead for data privacy. I do compliance discussions with customers across various industries, whether they are sporting bodies like the FIFA, whether they are banks, pharmaceutical companies, retail, everything across industry. I also lead discussions with partners. I started already 3.5 years ago, something within Microsoft, what we call the Data Privacy and Advisory Council. And this is a closed group of members with 25 customers globally from all over the world in different industries, whether it's oil and gas, such as Exxon, Shell, whether it's mining, such as Rio Tinto, whether it's pharmaceutical companies, banks. And we meet with the CISO and the Chief Privacy Officer, and we discuss and learn from each other, most importantly, in the spirit of what I call a growth mindset, as to how each organization is coping with, this realm of so many complex regulatory enforcements that came out, as well as not to be able to hamper the innovation, the technology, the digital transformation. We recently did one for COVID as well, to understand how are we coping to keep our business still growing in this new COVID world where people are more or less being forced to speed up a little bit their digital transformation. So that's been a fascinating journey. We're also collaborating with something known as the Digital Crimes Unit that we have in Microsoft. And then we have a Cybersecurity Defense Operations Center. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of conversations with various governments, regulatory authorities. We have people focused only to ensure what we call interoperability. So if there is one complex legislation that has been released that has a global impact, how do we ensure that other regional legislations are somehow aligned to that particular one, so that a company or a software provider or an IT services provider, cybersecurity services provider doesn't need to constantly, realign and reinvest to architect the solutions so that they remain compliant. Because at the end of the day, we live in a very, very fascinating world where I personally believe that data is the new currency, data is the new oil. There is so much of data being generated constantly through absolutely ubiquitous amounts of endpoints, right? So how do you manage this whole realm of data in a way in which you are secure as well as compliant at the end of the day? Because compliance plays a very big role as soon as you want to go global with whatever you're trying to achieve. So indeed, it's a very interesting period of time to be working. I've also done several trainings internally. I think it's important. The awareness must be achieved on a grassroots level so that you educate the people in organizations, you educate the people in your country as to why, data privacy, for example, is so relevant in today's world. If you think about it, what we are going to do today and what we do today and the legislation that we enforce today is going to impact our children's lives tremendously. So, if you look at it at the end of the day, as the Honorable Dr. Andrew Wheatley was talking, and I really enjoyed his presentation, and I think it's so great to have all these legislations being passed through. I think it's really important to know that everybody needs to find a way to communicate this in your own ecosystems so that there is a collective grassroots approach to grasp the knowledge and understand why this is important and what is the impact of that. So in the last presentation from the Honorable Dr. Andrew Wheatley, you heard the local legislations and programs that are in place. What I would like to do is perhaps give you a little bit of a perspective from a European lens. And I think it's important to understand that, and maybe in 5 minutes you would understand why, not only because I'm European or I live here, but within Europe, we have something known as the European Union Commission. And the 12th president of the European Union Commission was a gentleman called Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker. And he, together with the European Commission, had 10 political priorities in 2015 already. And I think one of those priorities is extremely significant. And I would encourage all the people listening to this webcast via Zoom and via YouTube to read up about it. It's known as the Digital Single Market, or DSM, Digital Single Market. And this is a very interesting initiative because this digital single market was all about how can the European Union, with all these countries that are physically so closely beside each other, have the possibility to enable businesses to digitize and to sell their goods and services in a streamlined manner, in a manner in which all are aligned within the union through regulation, so that your rights are protected, so that the folks who live within the EU are protected and their markets are protected from all the various threats that can occur. So it was a concept, the digital single market, which then got operationalized. And in order to operationalize that, there were several pieces of legislation that had to be formed and passed. We all know how difficult it is to form legislation. You need to do public consultation, and people have the right to oppose or to give a public opinion. So it went through all of that. And the GDPR, for example, if you've heard of this, the General Data Protection Regulation Act, was a part of this digital single market. That was one of the outcomes from that. Of course, you have other outcomes like e-privacy, the telecom regulations, which have been, made more recent as well. Most significantly, the GDPR, I would say, which you may have heard of, in my opinion, this changed the game, because the GDPR, finally it set a global bar for data privacy. And the US realized that they've lost the battle to be the leaders for data privacy because of the GDPR. And now the US have to be aligned to the GDPR, as is other countries as well. I would really, it's so significant, because from a cybersecurity, from a security data protection point of view, you must understand what happened in Europe. All of a sudden, because of the GDPR, CISOs of various companies, even around the globe, anybody doing business with Europe needed to be GDPR compliant, of course, if they deal with personal data from European customers. So all of a sudden, CISOs started getting more budget in order to improve their organization's security posture, or to enable cybersecurity resilience acceleration programs, meaning to have a common baseline for all endpoints and not point-to-point solutions if you have a global infrastructure that you have to manage. We all know sometimes when you deal with security officers or personnel, depending on the size of the customer, that they always struggle for budget. Security is always a cost, period, right? It wasn't considered as a business enabler. But now in this new world with the data, and where it's not just enough to be able to deal with the data with innovative technologies like blockchain or like artificial intelligence, etc., but you have to be able to deal with data and be compliant. And part of that compliance is security. So it is highly significant, the impact that the GDPR had globally and is still having. I personally feel that the so-called digital single market initiative, it could be very interesting for CARICOM as well. As a matter of fact, I think one of the first countries to embrace that from CARICOM is Brazil with the LGPD Act, which, by the way, is totally aligned to the GDPR, coming back to the interoperability principle that I was talking about. So when it comes to now, giving some advice or just a global, lens, if Jamaican organizations who handle sensitive data would be interested in doing business on a global level, whether it's the US or whether it's Europe, I would think if you first try and understand what this digital single market initiative is, and what are the elements of it at a macro level, and then try and understand what it is that you could do from a skilling point of view to understand principles of, for example, the principles of data protection by design and default, right? There's It used to be called privacy by design and default as per the Article 25 in the GDPR, and now it's been renamed to data protection by design and by default. This is a very hype term in Europe at the moment. So if you as an organization would understand these principles and develop your product and or services based on these principles, then you could market and differentiate yourself from the others by being able to, build your business on trust. So to win over people by showing that they can trust you with their data would be secure. You would take measures against breaches. I don't want to go to a very technical level, of course, because one can talk about the entire kill chain and how you prevent a breach and what phase of the kill chain. But just in general, if you apply the right principles on data protection by design and by default, taking a risk-based approach to understand the impact of, what would happen with people's data if it should be breached, to be able to understand how to mitigate those with certain technical and organizational measures, to be able to understand also what it means, from an end user's point of view, how would they complain to authorities or to regulators, what we call, in Europe, we call them the data protection authorities. As a matter of fact, if you're very ambitious, I would welcome you to even follow some of the data protection regulating authorities. The one which is highly active is, for example, the ICO in England, even though they're no longer in the EU. But they're quite active on their page. They give a lot of guidance, especially for startups and for people who want to penetrate the market. Another one which is interesting is Ireland. Not just because the language would be the same as in English, but even the French Data Protection Authority, which they call the CNIL, they have also tools which they give in English language. So it's just something different. If you feel that you would really like to be able to market your services here, it's quite a huge market here. I would encourage you to understand what data and data protection means from a European point of view. Now, the other thing is, I feel that this whole notion of marketing in the new digital age, if you have the ability to understand when you're dealing with your customers' data, are you actually processing that data? Are you being a data processor, or are you controlling the data, which means you subcontract to other people to process data for you? If you look at it from these aspects, and if you understand how you could articulate you protecting the data of your customers, and you can manage to do a marketing campaign or a message around that, that would certainly get you customers over here, whether it's in the US or in the Europe. It's simply because, especially in these days where people are forced to go online, people always have a choice to decide where they would want to go. As an example, I started noticing that all of a sudden, when I'm talking to people on WhatsApp, in whatever group, for example, that they pop up as, friend suggestions on Facebook. Clearly, those are not good data privacy and data protection practices, because I never gave them consent to do that. And, as soon as I heard of this app, which has been designed on privacy principles called Signal, all of a sudden people were rushing away from WhatsApp and going to Signal. It's just an example. I'm not here to promote anything. I'm not being paid to promote any products or services, but it's just an example. There are other companies which are doing a fantastic job of promoting their services with good privacy and data protection principles. I can think of Proton as another one, if you've ever heard of that. So this is just to summarize, when it comes to, a global lens, we take data protection and data privacy very seriously. Cybersecurity, cybersecurity, these measures form a very important part of data protection. in a European lens. And it's extremely important to be able to understand how you can have your products and services built right from the first stage when you're visioning a product to be built, using data protection by design and default principles. I think my time is over as per my suggested time slot. So I'm going to pause now unless people want me to speak more or talk more, but I'll be hanging around. I'll try and stay awake for questions. And I hope I was easily understandable. I apologize. I have a different accent compared to all of you. I hope it was not too difficult.
No, man. The message was received and translated clearly. It was perfect. So before we move on, Mr. Khan, I don't know if you have anything else that you'd like to add. I would hate to, disrupt your presentation. So though you have reached the 10-minute slot, we are permitting you a few more minutes to continue if you wish.
Sure. I think, I really feel and I understand from an interpersonal, intercultural point of view, different regions have different ways of thinking about certain principles. I personally am very passionate about this topic because I believe that this really will define our children and their children's future on how they go about data. And if this awareness and this education is not done, a lot of abuse can also happen, not just innovation using these kind of technologies. If we think about just how long ago all these social media started, and if we think about what the evolution of that is going ahead as well, a lot can go wrong. So I really feel the responsibility lies on this people, in this call, in this generation, to be able to do things in a manner that has an impact, not just a monetary impact for a business short term, but also mid to long term to secure the future of the next generations. And that's why, because we've always had these discussions, in different symposiums. What is it that we can do at the end of the day to create this awareness? And one of the things that we can do is to, at least in a mini micro ecosystem around us, try and get people to take this seriously. Doesn't work always. You come on stage and speak to 1,000 people and expect 1,000 people to go back and, change the world with their data protection and data privacy principles. But if there can be a small ecosystem for each individual, that does make a difference.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Khan. You've given us somewhat of an international view on the significance of data privacy. And undoubtedly, this pandemic has forced, or perhaps I'd say encouraged us to look to and to adapt to the paradigm shift of digital transformation globally, as you would have mentioned. And information and communication technologies are, as you've put it, are penetrating today into all areas of our lives. And having realized, forgive me for using this term, but the radicalness of these upcoming changes, many nations are already engaged in developing roadmaps or strategies, as Dr. Wheatley would have earlier told us, for the development of a digital economy. And we are privileged to have you paint a picture of the stages of development in the EU, as we acknowledge that data, as you put it, is the new currency and the transition to the digital single market. So thank you very much, Mr. Khan, for your presentation. And at this time, we will be taking a brief intermission where one of our committee members, Miss Catherine Smith, will be entertaining us with a violin performance. All right. Thank you very much, Miss Catherine, for that beautiful rendition of, I believe, Great is Thy Faithfulness. All right. So at this time, I would like to invite other members of our audience to subscribe to our Generation 2000 YouTube channel and to follow us on the various social media platforms at G2K Jamaica. All right, at this time, we will be moving into our third presentation, which will be done by Mr. Christopher Record, and I invite committee member, Mr. Russell Magan, to give us the intro.
Hi, everyone. I've had the privilege of inviting Mr. Christopher Record, the Chief Executive Officer for leading information technology support organization, T-Tech Limited, is Jamaica's only pure-play IT outsourcing and managed services provider. Chris has 33 years of experience in delivery and implementation of information technology and digital transformation solutions, and is a regular speaker on information technology and IT security in the IT industry in Jamaica. Chris is currently the chairman of the Private Sector of Jamaica's Innovation and Digital Transformation Committee. I'd like now to introduce Mr. Christopher Record to the stage.
Hey, Russell, thank you very, very much for that introduction. And I'm very, very happy that you kept it short and sweet. I'm not as endowed with all the education and all the accolades like Dr. Wheatley. So one day when I grow up, when I get to his stage, then I can have some of those very eloquent introductions. Thank you very much. Congratulations to the G2K team for conducting this event. This is a very timely and a very topical subject that you have chosen to discuss today. And I thank the presenters before who gave different perspectives. And so just before me, Mr. Khan from Switzerland. Man, it should be, I don't know, midnight or past midnight there now, 7-8 hours. I hope he's still awake. Thank you very much for your perspective, sir, your European perspective. And of course, thank Dr. Wheatley for setting the stage. And both presentations are extremely timely with respect to a number of areas that, with the various roles that I wear. So as was said a while ago, I am the chair of the PSOJ Digital Transformation Innovation Committee. And one of the discussions that we are having right now, Dr. Wheatley, is around coming up with well, I guess we may call it a policy guideline document, because your organizations that you're a part of are the ones that write policy. So me and a number of our members are, in fact, just as we speak, are in fact working on the infrastructure and all the various topics that will guide, inform, and maybe contribute to any such policy guideline document that's being created. So very, very happy that that is something that is topical and very, very needed. And of course, interesting to hear the perspectives of Dr. Khan and what's required for this type of potential regional version of what the European call their digital single market. I'm sure that some bright folks are already considering, is that possible for our Caribbean region? And I'm sure that some aspects of it are. Having visited Switzerland, visited Europe, one important difference is, of course, on a continent versus us being spread all over the places and all these different islands and transporting these goods that we may buy amongst each other and from our neighboring countries. We have to factor in how we're going to get them here at the best possible and most efficient cost. So myself and Andrew Nooks, we have been on a number of stages, and he's coming up after me, on a number of stages talking about these very topics over the last couple of years. And data privacy, data protection, various people look at them that they're the same. And one of the things that we will try to separate is how to consider them, how to think about them, and against the backdrop of all that's been said before, what our various perspectives are on them. So I will speak from the perspective of being a provider of information technology, specifically data protection, cybersecurity, information technology solutions, and just some very high level things that we have, me and some of my colleagues have put together around how you, I'm just talking to a general user of technology, a small business, small, medium-sized business, how you should consider what you should be doing to protect this data, all this data that been talked about earlier, all the private data that you may have in your organization. Maybe it's your information on your staff. Maybe you have a payroll of, let's say, 5, 10, 15, 25 people. You have that private data. Maybe it's your customers' data. Maybe it's information around whether it's their name, their addresses, their credit card information, whatever it might be that you have for these customers. What things do you need to consider? What things should you put in place to protect that information? So for us in the IT space, this is the first law. The Data Protection Act is the first law in our country that actually is, let's call it, instructing our businesses to do something around protecting data. While specifically it's around people's private data and personal information, it's the same set of technologies that are used to protect data that you have in your organization in general. So when we started studying the Act, just when it was initially tabled, said the bill initially when it was tabled, we as IT practitioners realized, you know what, this is something that we need to give our support. We need to educate around it. We need to create a decent amount of awareness training around this. And this is what we have been doing out there in the market. So I'm not sure if I have any access to present any slides or anything. Let me press the share button and see what happens. No, host disabled participant. All right, so I'll just talk through.
You should be able to present because we had authorized the access moments ago.
So when I press the share button, it says host disabled participant sharing. So no worries. As soon as that is ready, I can share 1 or 2 slides. But I'll just kind of talk through what I have here. So DPA is no law. The Data Protection Act is no law. So what? How does it affect you? And specifically, how it affects you is around risk to your business, and of course, risk to the data subject, the owner of that data. Whether, as I said, it's your customer or your team members in the organization. I recently appeared on a interview show, Kalila Reynolds Media interview show, one of our YouTube channels. And we had this discussion, very interesting discussion around who owns your email, right? And I said some thought-provoking things, and that was by design. It was intentional to have people start to discuss this because it was a specific case. My wife happens to be a data privacy practitioner. And so one of our regular discussions are around cases globally. And, Mr. Khan mentioned the ICO in various countries, and that's something that she studies very in detail. And we have these cases that we discuss every now and then. And there was a specific case out of Europe, where a team member in an organization left the organization, and his email address was a critical email address for some of the services that the organization provided, and of course the partnerships and all of that. He left the organization, but he knows that the company was still using his email address to receive information inquiring about those specific products and services, and the fact that his email was still in use. The gentleman wasn't stupid. He knew that the Data Protection Act in his country had some protection around his private data, which his email is. And he came back to the organization sometime later to kind of just say, hey, you still using the email address? And all the information that you got from it, can I see it? And so that was where the discussion, was provoked around, well, hold on, who actually owns your email? Because it is your company, the company's name, and it happened to be your name at the company name.com or that whatever it is. But the fact of the matter is that they are very smart data privacy lawyers who can sit down and argue and win around who owns that specific data. So that is one of the first things that we started discussing around privacy and risk to the data subject and other things that can possibly happen. So the intention there was to kind of understand, where do you stand as that data subject? What are your rights? What specifically can happen? And I think Mr. Khan a while ago gave the example of talking to some people on WhatsApp. And you know what happened? When he said it, I said to myself, that kind of been happening to me too. And then all of a sudden, you're getting a friend request on Facebook. And as obvious as it is, I kind of just paused. I said, no wonder all this whole pile of new friend requests has been popping up over the last few months. Duh, it should have been obvious, simply because you get pulled into all these new WhatsApp groups, you have all these various conversations going on, and all of a sudden these things happen. So exactly, what are our rights? Because that's my email address, that's my contact, that's my private data. Okay, I'm told I can share now, so I'll just kind of sort of just pop up 1 or 2 slides. And I was going to time myself and I forgot to start my timer. So someone has to keep me honest with time here, because my timer was right beside me and I didn't press start, because I want to make sure that I give other people their full time, and also want to make sure that I honor the organizers and their time allotments. Right. So how does it affect you? Kind of spoke about that. Now, one of the things that will happen with our law here in Jamaica, one of the main things that must happen, and by the way, lots of questions have come about in recent times around the fact that, hold on, is it law yet? Is it not law? The law has passed. It was passed in the lower house and the upper house, and the Governor General has assented it, has signed it. What has not happened yet, and it will happen very shortly, is a date, an effective date that the minister will say, as of this date, you will now be charged for certain things. So the fact that the law is there, you can go and search and download the law, Data Protection Act of 2020, and you can start to understand all the various requirements. My organization, my wife's organization, Design Privacy, they have been helping customers already do that, because we have a buffer time. But the instant that penny drops, or the hammer drops, whatever you want to call it, and the law now has an effective date and is enacted, then all of a sudden there's going to be a lot of scrambling. So what a number of people, as I said, myself, Andrew Nooks, Trevor Forrest, a number of us out there, we've been out there on every pulpit that we can, making people aware about all the various requirements of this act, right? So how do you become compliant with our act here in Jamaica? You got to file, right? And in starting the process, of course, there's assessments have to happen within the organization. The magic question, the big question is that what do you do with people's private data? Your own staff, your customers, what exactly do you do with it? Where does it come in the organization? How does it come? How is it stored? How does it move around? How does it leave? How long do you keep it for? At the risk of provoking a kind of controversy, I traveled recently, and as I was coming back into the country, you have to apply for permission using an online application. And the questions that were asked in that application, I sat there for a moment and I said, I need to call my lawyer. I mean, I didn't. I mean, I just answered the questions. But the amount of questions that are asked in these applications, our new law will protect us, because it has to be relevant, it has to be specific, because some of the questions around me coming back into the country, I really don't think some of these, whoever is giving me the approval to come back, really and truly needs to kind of know some of the things that they're asking. I'm not going to get into that detail, but there are some forms that we have to fill out where we go for specific services. we need to start asking some tough questions. Why exactly do you need this information? All right, you may get a good answer. All right, how long are you keeping this information for? So these are some of the things that will happen as part of the law. Now, they've given you a reason why they need it. They have given you when they're going to, get rid of it, destroy it. So what happens in between? How is it protected? So this is where organizations like mine come in, where we help our customers. So I will just share a few slides, and myself and a few practitioners out there in the industry. I've pulled together various teams around trying to come up with some simplified way of explaining to folks what needs to happen around data, protecting private data. And I'm careful to use data protection, because what's happening is that in the IT industry, we used to use the term data protection for all relevant data. Anything that is digital, how do you protect it, back it up, on all of these things. What's happened in the new law is that they have been using data protection to mean people's private data. Andrew Nooks will talk a little bit more about that maybe, but I'm just going to talk about what we've been saying to people, or what me and some of my friends who have been kind of taking a look at all of these global, let's call them the global information technology security frameworks, or various auditing frameworks, and any kind of cybersecurity frameworks that we're found. And I've spent some time, literally, you throw it in a blender, you pull everything back out and say, how do I simplify this? And so I've kind of simplified it down to five strategies that if you do these 5 things, you can present up to 80% of the breaches that the bad guys may use to come in and steal that private data, right? So this is where now I'm going to press the button and hope and pray that the technology works. So let me press this screen share button, and the screen share button worked. So I'm going to share my screen, and on the screen you should see top 5 strategies to prevent over 80% of breaches. So this is me trying to create. I said to myself and a few colleagues, I'm like, all of this, NIST and COBIT and ISO 20. I said, look, what small business people, I'm not understand all them confusion, and I'm not going to sit down and read all those things. Why can't we just simplify some of it? So I came up with some stuff. I ran it by some friends, and myself and another practitioner, Mr. Trevor Forrest, we have been writing a series of articles in the Jamaica Observer over the past 12 weeks, and it's just explaining these top 5 strategies. So number 1 is take stock. And I've kind of just, just use simple language that we all use. So taking stock. So take stock means you must know all the hardware, meaning the PCs, the laptops, the desktops, all the routers, the switches, all the hardware, the IT-related hardware that you have in your organization. You must also know all the IT-related software that you have in your organization. And so knowing all of that, so you know what to protect, and you know what to allow, what not to allow, is massively important. So taking stock. Next item is lock shop. And of course, I kind of play a little, play around with the words a little bit. And lock and shop simply means, let me give you an example. Flow or Digicel or whoever is your favorite provider comes to your house and they install a router. And from the day they install a router, you have not touched it. It comes on and it says Flow or Digicel, and you lift up the box and it has a password at the bottom of it. You have never changed any setting on it. You can tighten your security features a lot more than that. So whether it's at your house or your office, this happens a lot, where the default passwords are what are currently in use. So my suggestion is that in general, lock shop. As I said, no default passwords on your firewalls and all this stuff. Also, who has access to all of the stuff? All of these bits of technology that you have roaming around in the office or home, who has access to all of it? And massively important as a part of lock and shop is ensuring that you have 2-factor authentication turned on, or multi-factor authentication turned on all the various technologies that you use. Your email, right now, if you're using any kind of online banking, it has to be on, it must be on. So it's something that you just have to get used to, massively important. So take stock number 1, lock shop number 2, and install protection number 3. Install protection is, again, around So we're talking about turning on and hardening the hardware that's there. So your laptop and your various computers that you're using, whether it's even your tablet, whatever you're using, turn on software that will help with malware, anti-malware software. So this is massively important. They're out there. As a matter of fact, this is what we used to use only before. Remember the antivirus days? That's all we had. Now it gets a lot more complicated than that. So I'm just saying that ensure that these things are in fact there. So the next thing is patch it. Patch management is a massive, massive overlooked tool to fight the bad actors who are trying to steal our private data. And the fact of the matter is that we all are guilty of it. I'm sure that there's at least 5 or 6 or 10% of the folks here who have sat at our machines. A warning comes up. Please click here to update software. And you say, you know what you do? You click the later button, right? I will do this later. I'll do this next week, and you forget that never. You miss out on all the important patches that happen. In some formal offices, they may say, well, hold on, patch days, patch Tuesday, patch Friday, whatever you want to call it. And they may wait and do it then because they may have to test certain software and test certain things. That's fine, not wrong with that. But the fact of the matter is that you must patch your equipment. I try to, even at home, I go through even my tablets. I mean, I have children. I say, come bring the tablets and make sure that you have the latest software, various laptops that are at home. I mean, I have like a mini data center at my house. I've tried to make sure that I update on all of these matters. So patching, software, operating system updates, massively important because the organizations that develop the software, they know what the vulnerabilities are and they have put in patches to fix it. Now, last but not least, I saw a few folks in the YouTube chat, at Daniel Landers and Larissa Babelal making comments around the user. And yes, you're right. We have to also do something to stop the security breaches at the weakest link. And the weakest link is you. The weakest link is us, is the people. We're the ones clicking on the link and we're the ones allowing it. So one of the things that has to happen is just basic awareness training. We have to train our users, our team, our family. Do not click on that link. This is what malware looks like. This is what someone trying to do a confidence trick, whether it's a business email compromise, whatever it may be. But we have to train our users around recognizing what bad actors do and how they come in and try to steal the private data that's going to be used to do all of this business transaction, local, international, that we're trying to do. We have to learn to lock it down and have to learn to protect it. So that's my about 15 minutes out of my 10 minutes. I will not go through the rest of my 45 slides that I have. I'm only showing you 6. And so this is the summary: awareness training, right? Because that touches on the biggest thing. We have to learn to recognize when these bad things are happening. And it's something that even in my organization and some of my customers, something look funny, don't just reset the machine. Just think, could this be a security incident? Yes, I know it kind of get a little bit paranoid sometimes, but it's better to be safe than sorry. I've always said it. As I say, tech stock, where there's apps and devices, access management, who has access, patch management. And the backup, I haven't gotten into the whole backup thing, but one backup is not backup. 2 backups, you need to have a minimum of 3 backups of your critical, important data, and especially those your customers' data, the data of your team members, your staff, any private data that you have for persons. You better make sure that that is protected and backed up somewhere. And of course, I have to put it in. I say it in certain forums and people really don't believe that this happens. Yes, people are still out there stealing software. Many of our companies are still using illegal software. I have been in situations where, let me tell you something, legitimate organizations, people who are, supposed to be doing the things the right way, and I'm just asking for a free copy of Office and asking for a free password for this, and I can't get an Adobe. What you going, so man? Chum man, Bill Gates now miss nothing. No, you need your own legitimate software. You need your own version. So all the patches and everything will work for you, because look, losing people's private data is going to become massively, massively expensive. Once our Information Commissioner's Office come into play and anything untoward with people's private data, someone will come and knock on your door and they have the power to shut down your business. So it's massively important that we play by these rules. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I don't even know what time it is, but I'm at about 15 minutes. So any questions or anything at all?
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Record. And, firstly, I must thank you for giving us the top 5 strategies to prevent well, we can incorporate to prevent over 80% of cyber breaches. And I'm certain that our viewers will, forever remember that, to lock shop and to patch it, as we are indeed, as you put it, the weakest link in this digital reality. And Mr. Record, I am just happy that you have gone a bit into the legal sphere of our discussion on data privacy. And I'll just use this as an opportunity to remind the members of our audience to join us again on Wednesday, the 25th of August, same time, same place, as our panelists or presenters rather, who will be members of the legal profession, will be giving us the legal perspective of data privacy and delving a bit into the Data Protection Act. And at this time, I'd like to hand over to my co-host or co-moderator, Mr. Amor, who will be going into our giveaways. Nathaniel, you're mute.
Salutations, everyone. We definitely enjoy the pieces from the individual speakers thus far. Honestly, for someone who has a very limited amount of knowledge as it relates to data protection and cybersecurity, I must say that I have some advice to carry home and tell my mother and tell my family members about. So especially not to click on those links that you get in your email, not to click on those links that you see on Facebook. You're not going to receive that giveaway via a link. You're not going to receive that giveaway. You're not going to receive that house via email. So I'm going to definitely inform them and try to see if we can get some more compliance. And thank you, Cheyenne, for letting everyone know that for the next presentation that we have, that will be on Wednesday, we'll be focusing on the legal framework in relation to data protection. A lot of persons have mentioned the Data Protections Act, and we will be turning that inside and out as we have members of the legal community who have years of experience in this area. The act itself is relatively new, so I'm really looking forward to getting that chance to know what's going on. So now, the giveaway. So for the giveaway, I have 2 questions actually. And one of the questions, you have to listen to the instructions because it's very important to listen to instructions clearly. The first question will be, you only can answer this question in the YouTube chat. So there's another criteria as well. You have to subscribe to the channel for us to acknowledge that answer. So when I go and I look at the name, I have a little database thing in front of me, so I'm able to tell. So when you answer the question, you have to be subscribed to the channel. So the question is, in which country is Mr. Khan currently based in? So the question is, which country is Mr. Khan currently based in?
So, Mr. Chairman, as your co-host, am I permitted to answer this question as well?
You will not be able to answer this question because I would have thought that you would have been attentive enough and you would have known which country is based in. The next question, right? Currently, what company does the next speaker work at currently? And for the next speaker, I'm going to allow the person to introduce them, but you're only allowed to answer this question via Instagram, and you would have to @ the page in a stored post. So the question is, which company does the next speaker work at? thank you, Sharon. I'll hand over to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I may be giving away the answer for your second question now, as I have been assigned the task of introducing our final speaker. So for those of you who are interested in the giveaway, just listen to my introduction. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have been given the esteemed privilege of introducing our fourth and final presenter for this afternoon, Mr. Andrew Nooks. Mr. Andrew Nooks has over 27 years of experience in the information and communication technology industry, with the last 15 years focused on information security assurance and advisory, and more recently, data privacy. Mr. Nooks earned a bachelor's in computer science and mathematics from the UWI and certifications from industry-leading organizations such as the Information Systems Audit and Control Association and the British Standards Institution. Mr. Nooks is a director with responsibility for innovation and disruption at Symposium and a leader in information security assurance and advisory services. He is responsible for efficiency, growth, and innovation. Mr. Nooks also provides services related to network penetration tests and vulnerability assessments and information privacy governance. He operated OpenWave Information Security for 10 years and continued to partner with Symposium. Prior to joining Symposium, he worked as an IT manager at Life of Jamaica. And for those of us who are at least 18 years old, will know that Life of Jamaica is the former name of Sagicor, where he was responsible for local infrastructure and application. Ladies and gentlemen, in true G2K online forum style, I invite you to use your raise hand signal or clapping emoji to give a warm welcome to our final presenter, Mr. Andrew Nooks.
Thank you very much, Shayan. Really appreciate it. It's really tough when you're the final presenter, because you have the tendency to just say ditto to all that have been said and just wrap things up real quickly. But I want to give thanks to the MP, Dr. Andrew Wheatley, for setting the stage and the framework, for Andras Khan for giving us the lay of the land globally, basically, the global layout. And for Chris to talk about the data security and stuff. As Chris said, we have been sharing many stages and many forums in data security and data protection. Also want to thank the G2K committee for considering us and for inviting us to present at your symposium. Really grateful for the opportunity. I'd love to get the opportunity to share screen. I was trying to send a me too when Chris said I would like access to share screen. But in the absence of that, I'll just push through until that has been sorted out. So the question that I people ask all the time, why is data protection so important? Well, technology has moved, and it has moved significantly. And it is becoming more complex. Data is being used to make decisions, from political decisions to business decisions, to who runs the next government. Data has been used in very creative ways to do that. Technology is more sophisticated and very invasive. So the use of data is now seen as the new oil, so to speak. As I share my screen, 1 second. Let me see which screen I'm sharing. Share. And let me see, I am here. All right, share. All right, you see my screen, great. What this has done, because of the nature of data now, it has left countries and organizations facing a complex risk matrix for ensuring that data is protected. But what is this data of which we speak? Well, the data that we talk about comes in three forms, as I know it. Modern, traditional data, which is just your name, date of birth, things about you, the person. But more recently, with technology, what has been happening is that more data has come on stream, and that relates to your location, your IP address, which is the number that you're known by on the internet, your social media, your location data is factoring a lot in authentication now. Your photographs are being factored, you know, persons tagging you on social media and all of that. Then you have the sensitive data, biometrics, health records, patient ID, sexual orientation, political affiliation is becoming one of that. And I'm sure, you know, when persons see people appear on certain platforms, you know, they will start making assumptions about affiliations and things like that. So that also becomes a part of sensitive data. But when we talk about data privacy, data protection, and security, there are a couple of things that we need to set straight. And Chris spoke about this a little bit. When we talk about data privacy, we're talking about the collection, the use, the disclosure, the maintenance, the access, the deletion of data. When we talk about security, we're speaking about three main tenets of security: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And somewhere in the middle, persons talk about protecting private data. And that's the data I mentioned before. And that is where both security and privacy intersect. And, you know, a lot of the laws, because a lot of the laws focus on this data protection has now become synonymous with data privacy for some reason. But as Chris mentioned, we've been talking about protection of data and protection of systems that are hosting data for a very long time, long before privacy became front and center with the passage of, or the coming into effect of GDPR in May of 2018, right? Interestingly, the People's Republic of China has also pushed through their data privacy law, and I would encourage you to start looking at that because it has some serious implications. So, but let's look at data protection and data privacy and what we need to consider when talking about data protection and privacy. Andras mentioned the change in name from privacy by design to data protection by design and default. And data protection by design and default and privacy by design has seven main characteristics, 7 design principles. One is proactive, not reactive. It says privacy protection must be a before thought. It shouldn't be an afterthought, right? Privacy ought to be your default setting. And in security, from a security perspective, we always say we want to be secure by default. We want also privacy to be your default setting. So if your systems are breached, after you have put in all your controls, things do happen. If your systems are breached, then by default, the data that you are hosting should also be protected. Then you have privacy embedded in the design. And for all of you who are practitioners out there, when you look at privacy by design, you want to ensure that from your conceptualize your idea to when your idea goes into production, it is considering privacy. So from the architecture of the systems to the data that you collect through ensuring that the data that you're collecting is only sufficient to do the business that you need to do the processing that you need to do. And the laws have a lot to say about that. And that will be broken down as I've learned on Wednesday. So I won't jump too much into that. Then you have full functionality. And full functionality is positive sum, not zero sum, right? Full functionality, we can always talk about protecting things, right? And when we look at protecting, we're saying, listen, at the end of the day, we still need the thing to use. So when you're putting in your controls, whether it be for privacy or for security, you have to ensure usability at the end of the day. This bicycle would not meet the usability criteria, but it seems pretty secure to me, right? So we have to consider that. Then it's end-to-end security, and Chris mentioned some aspects of the end-to-end security where we're talking about, you know, protecting your systems, taking an inventory of your systems and everything. And I will dive a little bit into that in my slide after the next. Then we have visibility and transparency. When you're collecting people's data, you ought to provide, you ought to notify people as to how the data will be used, how the data will be protected, and it should not be misleading information. Then respect for users' privacy. And respect for users' privacy would take into consideration, aside a borrowed from an organization we're affiliated with, the International Association of Privacy Professionals. It talks about Kaler's harms dimension and Nissenbaum's contextual integrity. And Kaler's harms dimension talks about objective and subjective harm. If data is disclosed and persons can prove by a measurable way that they have been affected by the disclosure of that data, then that is seen as objective harm. But then there's subjective harm, which is the fear that your data, after being disclosed, can be used against you in some way that would create harm. And when we're designing our systems, we have to take that into consideration. From Nissenbaum's contextual integrity, everything is within context. So when we're designing, the context of a hospital and protecting data for a hospital is different from that of a financial institution. So when we're designing, we also have to take into consideration the context, right? So let me talk a little bit about the security side of things. And from a security side, we talk about defense in depth, and the data protection by design and default and privacy by design. It's a pulling together of those two concepts of the privacy by design concept and the defense in depth concept. Chris spoke about the systems and the devices and what you need to do to protect your network and all of that. I will focus a little bit on the data without you know, indulging too much on your time. From the data perspective, we have to understand first and foremost the data that we have, the data that we collect, and the processes, the reason for collecting that data. And we have to ensure that first and foremost that the data that we're collecting is minimal for the processes that we're going to be running, right? Then we have to think about when we store our data, or when the data is in one of its three states: data in use, data in transit, or data in storage. How do we go about protecting those data in its three different states? And there are different ways of doing it by de-identification, removing that aspect of the data that can be used to identify the person that the data is about, the data subject, right? You also have encryption that that obfuscates the data, and you have anonymization, which basically is making sure that, you know, regardless of what the data is, it cannot be tied back to a person. Now, sometimes we do some of these things, and when we perform our processes on the data, it can still come back. If somebody talks about a middle-aged man that is always talking about data security and data privacy and stuff, it could come down to about 5-6 persons in Jamaica. If they start talking about a middle-aged man that talks about data privacy and data security that works at Simtai, then they're talking about, it can be narrowed down to one person. So when we're looking at data, we have to, and the ways of protecting the data, we have to ensure that we manage that. When we look at applications serve up data, whether it be a mobile application, or it be a web application, or even a regular client server, thicknet application, we call it. They serve data, and we have to ensure that those applications are protected. And we protect those applications by ensuring that we apply the design principles, the privacy by design, and the secure by design concepts in an application. So we have to know. Also, once we know what the data is, we want to ensure that we know how the data flows through the organization. And it's the flow of this data through the organization that will bring certain systems and things into scope. So if you have personal information that is flowing through a network switch and it's going to a particular user system, or it's going to be stored in a cloud server or a backup server, when you're looking at your inventory of data, all those systems come into play. When you look at securing that data, all those systems come into play. Based on this though, without keeping it too long, when we look at this, we can pretend that cyber threats and data protection and data risk are not real. We can tend to address the issue ourselves, or we can phone a friend because he was able to crack our phones, and he's just a genius, or she's just a genius. So they can do anything when it comes on to computer. So we can just defer to our friend to protect us, or we can hire experts. And I dare say that we at Simtai Consulting, we're experts who have invested time and effort in becoming certified. And Simtai is a leader in cybersecurity and IT advisory consulting services. We are IT transformation and governance specialists. We're data privacy and protection specialists. We have competent and qualified experienced consultants. We are also a partner with the International Association of Privacy Professionals, where we are a training partner, and we offer certification training in privacy technology, in privacy management, and privacy protection, the EU, the CIPP for the EU. So we have been running courses almost monthly and stuff, and we encourage you to check out our various platforms to get more information on that. Ladies and gentlemen, I hand over to our moderator. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. I'm sorry, are you able to hear me?
I am hearing.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Nooks. You have certainly, are you able to see me as well? I've been told that the visual was old. Okay, great, lovely. All right, thank you again, Mr. Nooks. You have certainly given us a refresher of what I'd say CAPE and even the university level information technology. And we are certainly appreciative of you giving us somewhat of an overview of privacy by design, which from my understanding is a framework based on proactively, embedding privacy into the design and operation of information technology systems and even business practices. So we are really appreciative of your contribution in our discussion. And at this time, I'd like to hand over to our chairman, Mr. Amor.
Firstly, I must say thanks to all of the speakers. In the interim, we have some questions that we have received from the YouTube chat as well as the social media channels. So I'm just going to pause for 2 minutes as we get the questions together so that we can direct them to the individual speakers.
All right, and while we wait on the questions, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to take this time to thank our entire team, our hardworking Generation 2000 and even the Foreign Affairs Committee specifically. And at this time, I must admit that this entire program or initiative would not have been possible, not even in the smallest chance, without one of our team leads, Ms. Shamon King, as well as Mr. Nathaniel Amor, our chairperson. So I'd like to invite you all to join me in bigging them up by using your thumbs up emoji or your clapping hands emoji. All right, over to you, Nathaniel.
One second, bring up the questions. So for the first question, I will be asking this first question to Mr. Record as well as Mr. Nooks. This person is a young person in university currently asking what they can do to start a career in data protection and cybersecurity. So what steps can they take right now? What courses could they look at right now, as well as what companies they could work for to get their feet wet?
Well, thanks for asking the question. And first thing they could do, they could go to www.ttech.com.gm and just click on the careers button, because we are hiring. And we also do have a great internship program. And we do have a number of stars that have come out of TTech to head into corporate. So that is one thing. The other thing though is, that person, they have to realize where their true passion and love is. Sometimes you hear about a lot of what's going on out there in the industry. You see lots of motion taking place, but really and truly, and Andrew Nooks can explain to you, this is a lot of hard work. This is a lot of long hours. TTech does a fair amount of incident response. We get called into organizations that have a breach, and we send our team in, sometimes physically or digitally, but you have to go in and you have to spend a lot of long hours, whether it's heavy lifting physically or heavy lifting digitally. In other words, removing hard drives and taking them out and putting hard drives. So if the person is predisposed to that type of work, are you hands-on? Are you a people person? One of the things I tell everybody nowadays is, hey, know thyself. And know thyself, there's a lot of personality tests and all of these things to kind of, and you kind of have an idea, are you a details person, not a details person? Because if you're not a details person, I'm not a details person. If you're not a details person, don't be jumping into this type of work that require a lot of details. If you're more a talker, I'm more of a talker. If you're more of a talker, then select jobs that sales, marketing, the type of jobs that require that type of skill. So know thyself, understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then match your job accordingly. But hey, as I said, come check us out. Let's go to ttech.com.gm/careers and put in an application.
Yeah, for me, the same, you can check out our website. We have jumped from about 30 plus employees over the last. You guys hearing me? Everybody, are you hearing me now?
We are hearing you now, but your internet seems to chip for a bit.
Yeah.
You can continue.
All right, great. So the last few months, we have jumped from
Okay, we're not hearing you right now. I'm going to just ask another question until whatever is the situation stabilizes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask a second question, and whenever the internet stabilizes, I will allow you to answer that question. So just stick a pin there until. So the next question that we have here is actually for Dr. Wheatley. Dr. Wheatley, are you here with us still?
Yes, I am. Go ahead, Chairman.
Okay, great. So you had made mention of the Data Protections Act, and currently it is definitely a hotbread type of legislation. A lot of persons are interested in it. A lot of persons want to learn more about it. A lot of persons want to get involved because many companies are going to have to get themselves organized to facilitate this. They're going to have data. They're going to have data controllers. They're going to have our data protection mechanism in place, and they're going to have to tell people why they're storing their personal data, and they're going to have to keep in line with the 8 pillars that are indicated in the Act. So with all of this information, we wanted to know if there is a public information campaign that is going to happen. If one has happened already, if it's currently under works, what type of public information campaigns we could expect?
Okay, a very good question, Nathaniel, very good question. I know for a fact that when the bill was tabled, that there was some amount of public educations consultation to get the input of the different stakeholders operating in the space, persons who are treating with persons' data. And I anticipate that before the regulations are fully rolled out, that the government needs to embark on a very aggressive public education drive, because this piece of legislation will affect quite a number of different groups within our society. And things that persons you used to take for granted, just how you collect someone's data, basically, say go to a doctor's office. Critical information is collected there, and as such, they themselves, even the persons working within that office, needs to be very careful. Sometimes a lot of information go out there, and we just see it happen out there on the internet. So it is critical for us to embark on an aggressive public education drive, and it is, for example, the banks, I know they have started the process of putting in place necessary measures to protect the data. But I know there needs to be some level of public education. We cannot take things for granted, assuming that everyone out there is aware of this piece of legislation. Even though that legislation is there to protect our citizens, we need to do some bit of public education. So I do hope that the government will embark on such a drive. I keep repeating myself, but I really do hope that in the very near future, before everything come into being, that we embark on that. That's a very critical piece of action that needs to be undertaken.
Well, whenever there are any drives, the organized G2K definitely can extend a hand in assisting with that public education, especially with getting information to the young people. So yes, that is something that we definitely wish to embark on at some point in time. I must also say it's the 2-year waiting period, or the 2-year transitioning period, is definitely a useful time span to get companies ready, to get persons ready. So within that 2-year time span, I definitely hope that persons get the information, persons are acclimatized and they get used to it. By now, they can start thinking of who they're going to have as their controllers from now, so that they don't have to necessarily fall within the category of people who have to face the penalty. So I do appreciate that answer, and thank you for coming out today. We do appreciate your input today. Okay. I'm going to go on to Mr. Nooks. Is your internet stable?
I am hoping that it is now.
Okay, I can both see you and hear you, so that is a positive. Great. Okay, so I'm asking, so just some context. I got the opportunity to speak with someone that is currently working at your company, and they said that your company does training as well. So I was hoping for you to tell me, someone who is interested in that career path, the steps that they can take, the mechanisms that they can use, what courses they should go and study now, what decisions they have to start making from now.
All right. So the training that would have been mentioned is our data privacy training in particular. And what I'd usually encourage persons to do is to familiarize themselves with the law. Just by picking up the act and reading it, get familiar with what is happening globally. And there are a lot of sites out there that are talking about privacy. Get familiar with what's happening globally. You also need to hone your skills in other areas, because there's a lot of administration type activities in data privacy, as well as the data protection side that deals with a lot of the cybersecurity type things. So it depends a lot on which side of that you want to go in. We offer 3 courses primarily. One is the Certified Information Privacy Technologist, which bridge the gap. I would tend to refer to that course as the privacy analyst type job. You have a systems analyst. This would be equivalent to a privacy analyst, where you are familiar with technology and you're trying to bridge the gap to get into privacy and privacy engineering. That's a CIPT. The CIPM, it is Certified Information Privacy Manager, is the course that talks about the governance side of privacy and how you operationalize and manage privacy. So that's the CIPM. And the CIPP is all about the privacy, the protection laws, and with a heavy focus on GDPR, because as Andras should have mentioned, that a lot of the laws that are coming now has the most of the components of the GDPR. So it is a very good base. For me, I currently lecture 2 of those courses, the CIPT, because of my heavy background in technology, and the CIPM because of my experience in management, in systems auditing, in governance and all that. So I lecture both of those courses and carry a wealth of experience. For the others, the CIPP, we usually partner with Carter Lindo, Grace Lindo in particular, to bring a legal perspective to CIPP, and I also contribute to the technical areas of that. In addition to that, we have Daniel Monroe from our team, who is very versed on IT audit and governance. And so those are 3 of the courses that we currently offer, and we're looking at building smaller, more manageable, bite-sized courses for different audiences.
Thank you for that information. Currently, I'm a law student. Hopefully, I'll be called very soon. And even myself, from hearing the presentation, trust me, it has definitely piqued my interest. Something that I would definitely want to explore at some point in time. So I hope that the persons at home that are watching, who are interested, they see that this is definitely an area of expertise that they can definitely invest in, because that is where the world is going right now. Everybody's going to have some knowledge as it relates to technology, and data protection is first. A person gets a gun so that they can protect themselves, a legal firearm, so that they might protect themselves when they are in if they're in a situation where they'll have to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Data
protection. If I may add, a few years ago, we looked at the landscape and we started talking about data network security, and that evolved through the years into application security and now cloud security. We started looking at data privacy back in 2017, and we are seeing the landscape, and data privacy and data protection, which has the cybersecurity component to it, will be where a lot of the skill sets are going to be needed, along with the other things: AI, machine learning, machine learning, and data science. Those are where the market is trending.
thank you for that information. And hopefully everyone takes that in mind. The final question for the question and answer segment goes to our visitor from across the globe. I won't say where he's from because that's one of the questions that we asked during the giveaway. That would go to Mr. Khan. Are you here with us still?
Yes, I am actually.
Great, Mr. Khan. You had mentioned in your presentation, you had spoke to some degree about the GDPR, and as what we have been hearing from the different speakers, it's something that has significantly impacted the global landscape in data protection and cybersecurity. And we do know that you currently work for one of the largest companies in the world. And I'm sure that everyone has had experience using Microsoft software. I think everybody in Jamaica has accessed Microsoft Word at least once in their lives. They've used Windows, they've used all kind of softwares that we all have become accustomed to. I just wanted to know if you're able to let us know what type of data security mechanisms does your company have in place that continually protects the information that persons put within those systems?
Yeah, so it's pretty much in line with what Mr. Nooks mentioned when he spoke about defense in depth. So for us, we typically look at security. So there are different aspects to security, right? So on one hand, securing the data centers. If you look at the physical security, then the operational security, etc. But if I move away from that, and if I talk about defense in depth, what I refer to with defense in depth would be the security on 4 different layers. So starting with the user and the identity of the user, then the device that the user is actually using, what is the device health of that particular user. Then we move to the next layer, which is the actual application or operating system that the user is using. And lastly, but most importantly, the data of the user that's being generated by using an app. And then, of course, through the whole data mapping, whether it's data that's currently being processed and then being stored somewhere, or it's in transit, or it's at rest. So if we start with the user, in essence, a user is the most important, I would say, starting point, because that's the identity. Your identity is extremely important to be able to protect with security measures. And I mean, if you just think about the world of phishing and all the various type of malware attacks, etc., that come in and penetrate, and then impersonation is another topic that you can speak about for hours together. But in essence, when somebody pretends to impersonate someone in order to get you to do something by clicking on something, and then get your credentials stolen, and then through lateral movement, they will go to more priced devices such as a server or a domain controller. It's getting a bit technical now, but at the end of the day, each person, when they try and hack you, is they're after crown jewels of your organization, right? So that stuff where there's really sensitive data, and then they can either hold you a bit ransomware, in which they say, hey, you got to pay us such and such amount of Bitcoins, otherwise you can't access your data, for example. So these things really happen, right? So the identity, and one of the most simplest ways of protecting the identity, and it was mentioned before, is with two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. As a matter of fact, the GDPR mandates this kind of a security measure. So that's on an identity level. Then when it comes to the device, the hardware you're using, we look at the likes of patching, we look at the likes of hardening your security devices, your security measures around devices, whether it's a client or a server or your end device. In this world, we've got all these devices. We've got small tablets as well as a phone. So it's about don't think about patch management for just your laptops, for example, but also for your mobile devices. So that's where the notions of mobile device management come in, right? So MDMs, another realm of security measures that you can look at. In Microsoft, when it comes to the identity, we're actually going passwordless, which means we don't use passwords anymore. We use the more advanced features of biometric measures or something which is known as Windows Halo, where the camera recognizes your face and either with a glass or without a glass and logs you in. Okay, so you don't have to put a password, because if you don't put a password, you can't forget a password, or you can't have a password stolen, pretty much, in essence, right? So that's the direction we're going in there. Then we spoke about the devices. When it comes to the apps per se, the apps need to be measured as well. We use something called conditional access. So every time I need to access my email, or every time I need to access data that's stored in a document repository somewhere, or a CRM system, any place where there's sensitive information, and if I'm not using the device that's being managed with my own IT organization, let's say I'm in an airport or I need to go to a kiosk to log in somewhere urgently, then there's something that kicks in, which is known as conditional access, in which, you know, if for example, my health is not, my device health is not good, and you know, it recognizes that there could be, for example, I'm trying to log on from Switzerland and 1 minute later I'm logging on from, let's say, Jamaica, then it's quite possible that something's not right, right? So we have, this is also known as real-time conditional access, where they see if there can be any discrepancies in the identity per se. So then the apps, apart from being managed from their application lifecycle management perspective, it's also important to modernize apps, to retire apps, to modernize apps. So we have a whole modernization of apps kind of a thing. There we're using something known as, you know, we shift on-premise apps into the cloud and Azure, because with Azure we have them more secure. Lastly, the data, when it comes to data, the way to protect data, the different ways to protect data. But the way we protect data is firstly, we encrypt data, whether it's at rest, in transit, or being processed with high encryption. But secondly, we also use a technology where we classify data. So then we can talk about data classification. We use labels, you know, this data is not sensitive, it can be publicly used, so it gets a general label, for example. Or if there is personal data involved, or if there's highly sensitive information like health data, gender, ethnicity, political views, etc., what was discussed before through Mr. Noakes, that as well has to be classified as highly confidential data, and then you can have that data classified, labeled, and then protected by encryption. I'm sorry, I spoke a lot now, but there's a lot to discuss in these rooms. So there's
yes, there definitely is a lot to discuss, and it really shows you how deep the well of knowledge is, as well as how much there is for us to know. There's so much mechanisms that are in place that we don't even necessarily realize. Currently, I have a Microsoft Surface Pro, and most times I log in, I get into my computer. I don't necessarily put in a password. It does facial recognition. Yeah. So that is definitely, it shows that there's been advancement within this technological sphere. But I have one more question for you to answer briefly, and I want to also ask Mr. Record to give an answer to this question as well. Most young persons in Jamaica have had some experience with social media. They have either a Facebook account or an Instagram account, a Twitter account, or any other type of account. What can the typical young person do to ensure that they have a certain amount of protection on these social media platforms to prevent themselves from getting hacked?
Well, I'll just say very briefly a few comments, and then I would let Mr. Record carry on. First of all, from a data protection point of view, from a security point of view, I would seriously encourage people to change their password regularly. Don't be one of those who has the same password for years to go, and then, you know, you know, you had bad luck and your relationship broke up and your ex-woman knows, even she knows your password. And then, you know, if she knows your password and if the relationship didn't end well, then you know what all can happen. Yeah. So the idea is really develop a practice if possible. And it's not easy. It requires discipline, but try and keep changing your password every 90 days. This is something that once a quarter, you know, if you get into a habit, and then don't keep a password which is that simple. Yeah, think of things that are dear to you and very private to you, and you could potentially use one of those terms as, you know, as your password, and then mix it up with a capital letter to start with a, you know, a special character such as the @ symbol instead of an A to put in there. So you have a combination of special characters. You have alphanumeric, capital, and bold and small. That's the thing. From a data privacy point of view, I would certainly.
So no 1, 2, 3 ABC passwords.
No, not really, not really.
Okay.
And then from a data privacy point of view, very briefly, make an effort. Go to the privacy settings, see what's in there, and you know, put what you feel is relevant for you. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. We really do appreciate your wealth of knowledge, and you know, no worries on the time, because honestly, there's not much other places that people can go to get this information right here. So we do appreciate it. So I asked the same question to Mr. Record. What can Jamaican young people do to protect themselves in the online space?
I'm going to answer the question a little differently from my colleague, Andros Khan. I will start by endorsing everything that he said, because everything he said is correct. You know, complex password, multi-factor, and all of that. However, as a parent of two teenage children, they don't care. They don't care about their privacy. They don't care about their passwords. They give their passwords to all their friends. All their friends have their passwords. They don't care. And it's mind-blowing to me. I sit with them and their friends, and I have discussions about data privacy, and they're like, hey, if they're in class and they need to send a streak or send something, their friend has to do it. So they give their friends their password, and that's it. So that's at that level, because the platforms that they use are TikTok and Snapchat. It's different from, we're using Instagram, Facebook, and things like that. So all the protocols, let's use that we're trying to ask our business users to abide by, two-factor authentication, all of these things are the same for any social media. But somehow, whether it's the education that Simta and Andrew may be doing, and then having those folks who receive that education go home and try to pass it down, but it's a whole different world with kids below a certain age. Now, if the person's a young adult and they're using it for business, then by all means, you have to ensure that all, you know, I mean, we took 3 or 4 framework platforms and we tried to simplify them, right? And, you know, using fun words like, you know, lock, shop, use protection, you know, patch it, all these various things. But it's really and truly complex cybersecurity frameworks that we're trying to simplify. So if your social media is for business, just use all the same techniques. Multi-factor authentication is one of the most powerful ones that can be used, because once you turn that feature on, if someone else tries to access your account from anywhere else, you will be notified immediately. Don't write your password and stick it on the desktop. Don't write it down in the, you know, and paste it on your computer screen, things like that. Those are the basic things that, I mean, that I can just beg. It's the basic that I think we can do.
If I may jump in with one more point, Nathaniel, it's also data minimization is important. You know, you only put out there what you want others to see.
Yes.
You know, once you're going to put something out there, make sure that you don't mind people seeing it.
Again, Andrew, yes, you're correct, but these kids, they don't care.
I know. I have one. I know, Chris. I mean, a few years
They
ago,
don't.
I was having the discussion that privacy is dead based on this generation, and stuff. But I see more and more persons trying to protect them from themselves. So
Yes.
let's see where it goes.
By the way, that's the same in other areas too. With I'm working on a piece around this whole data protection, very similar to vaccine protection. But anyway, that's a different story. Yes, we're trying to protect them from themselves. We understand.
Well, and I really don't want to carry this on too long, but there's an analogy. So for you look at two sports. You look at the sport of football and look at the sport of basketball. In football, you, on a regular occasion, you don't see more than 5 goals being scored in that particular match. That's typical. That's not the typical score that you see. But in a game like basketball, it's more attacking oriented. So it's consistent attacking. So the reason why I use those two sports is because I want to know the fight for data protection. Are we currently in a state where it's harder to defend or information than it is for attackers to get within our information, in terms of, are the hackers further ahead than the protective mechanisms currently? Because we look and we see different companies being hacked on a daily basis, and they would say that they have put in at least some form of data protection mechanism. So are we currently in a state where it's harder to protect our data than it ever was before?
Yeah. And so let me answer the question 2 ways. Natalia, sorry, I wasn't sure if it was for me or for Andrew, but let me just jump in and answer before Andrew answers, right? I mean, so my study on it so far, I just came from a technology IT security conference a couple of weeks ago in Orlando, and the discussion was around the very same question they just asked. And the answer is very interesting, because they say, look, the hacking environment out there, it's now a business. You have hacking as a service. In other words, there are organizations, it's a regular business, they have a helpline, a help desk, you go in and buy the service, and they're in, I don't want to say it's in protected countries, but they're in countries where the instruction is almost, as long as you don't touch anything in this country, do anything you want to do, I don't business, right? So it's a business. So you have the ease of all the technologies written out there to attack us. And then we on the other side now, myself, Andrew, Trevor, and all of us who are in this business, we are out there trying to inform the people that this thing is happening and we need to stop it. So the technology is there to stop it. We can stop it. Remember, one of the things that I had in my presentation is that the weakest link is the person. So once you inform and educate and train, that is one thing. Andres Khan's organization, I mean, the technologies that they now have built in, way more advanced than they had before, but it's for us to go in and turn it on and configure it. And will the customer pay for us, pay for Andrew, myself, to come in and go do that for them? Because they may say, sure, the usual thing, not happening to me, I don't need to worry about that. So it's a mixed answer. The fact is that the technologies on our side are higher, but the technologies on the attacking side are also higher. And sadly, the hackers are winning, sadly.
Yeah. I'll respond to it this way. From the perspective of the hackers, from the perspective of the hackers, you have free reign. Chris mentioned the different stuff as a service, ransomware as a service, and all of that. You have, as an attacker, you have free reign. You're not cautious about the systems that you're going to break or the damage that you're going to cause. You're just doing your thing. From a security practitioner perspective, those within the organization, those as consultants, you're asked to test or to secure things. But by the way, you have to do it with both hands tied and your feet bound. So you have to ensure that the systems are still up and running. At the end of the day, the business can continue. You know, so you run into that challenge. The hackers are winning, but if we take the approach that things can and will go wrong, then what we will do is to put in the contingency. What do we do after something has gone wrong? And that is where your incident management and your incident response come into play. We have gotten several calls, and I'm sure Chris have gotten some of these calls about ransomware attacks. And when you try to help the organization, the first thing you ask, are your systems backed up? And most persons will say, boy, we don't know when last it was, or if it has ever been tested, or if we're backing up the malware whilst we're backing up, depending on the methodology that we choose. Now, if you have a good incident management and incident response plan, you'll anticipate as much as you can and put protections in place for them. And even with that, things will still go wrong. You also have to bring in your insurance partners into the mix to help you to defend and to protect. No, Andras want to say something on this, so I'll hand over.
I was
Go ahead, sir, Andras.
I was just thinking and hoping that with the Data Protection Act being enforced, as and when it would be in Jamaica, that the behavior of the people, you know, who are the organizations who are responsible for the data of the people, that they change the mindset a little bit to, you know, okay, if something happens, we'll see, as opposed to, let's assume we already have a breach. What is it that we can do about it? Because we're supposed to protect our citizens' data as per this Data Protection Act.
Yeah.
So if that switch in the mindset happens, and again, I understand there's a cultural element, and I'm not that aware of, unfortunately, of how it is in Jamaica in detail. But if a Data Protection Act like this cannot make a switch in the mindset, then it will be very difficult. If it does make that switch in the mindset because of the accountability factor and that there will be fines imposed or whatever, I don't know the details of your local act, but then that could potentially help, in my opinion.
Yeah. The Data Protection Act is one thing, Nathaniel, and what has happened is that we have a Cyber Crimes Act, and we made a presentation to the Joint Select Committee who's looking at the revision of the Cyber Crimes Act. But what we don't have in place is a Cyber Security Act. So we're focusing on the criminal aspect of data protection and the criminal aspect of cyber breaches. We're not focusing on the protection aspect. And that's one of the changes that I'd love to see in our legislation, that we shift focus a little bit, like in China, in Singapore, in Tanzania. They have cyber security acts, as opposed to, which incorporates the penalties for breaching the security, but there's a strong focus on protection. So that's what I'd love to see happen as one of the changes for Jamaica.
Okay, we have definitely exceeded the time today, but honestly, whenever you have a room of brains, you definitely are going to get an excellent discussion. So I would have the responsibility of doing voter thanks. So firstly, I must say thank you all for coming out. Persons that are currently on the Zoom call, persons that are currently on the YouTube call. Thank you for the persons who are currently in the chat. We see you giving your words of encouragement, asking your questions. This has definitely been a very engaging discussion. We currently, G2K Foreign Affairs, at the beginning of the year, we had definitely set out to ensure that we did not just have the regular, one second. My apologies. We did not have the regular events that we would have been used to, but we really did want to try to explore different possibilities and tackle other world issues and have public information forums like this where the common person gets the opportunity to log on and receive information that they would have had to otherwise pay for in different spaces. Right now, as the Foreign Affairs Chairman, I'm very proud of the work that my committee has been doing and will continue to do, because we have 2 more days of events. On Wednesday, the event will be mainly focused on the legal framework in relation to data protection. And on Friday, we will be focusing specifically on the GDPR and its impact on world trade. So I am definitely proud of the work that the committee has been doing. Special thanks to a particular member of the committee, that is Shamon King. She has really been an essential part of this in terms of planning and execution. She does wear many hats in this, on the PR side, on the marketing side, on the planning and execution side. And trust me, this would not have been possible without her. Each of the speakers would have even gotten the chance to interact with her within the last couple of weeks. And honestly, without her assistance, this would not have been possible. Thank you to you, Cheyenne, for helping to host this event. Honestly, it was brilliantly hosted. Even when I had technical difficulties in the beginning, you were able to hold on the fort. Thank you, Catherine, for your lovely rendition. It was a really good performance. When I watched you playing that violin, it really showed that even though we're in a lockdown currently, we're able to have an event like this where it really doesn't feel much different from coming to something like this in person. And I definitely do appreciate that assisting us in trying to advance the organization, advance the cause from the technological perspective. I must thank the other members of the committee who had read the bios. And now we'll go on to the speakers. Thank you, Mr. Khan, for tuning in at wee hours of the morning in Switzerland. We really do appreciate that. You gave us more information than we even had budgeted for, and honestly, that is something that we definitely appreciate. You gave us an international perspective on things, and it was because of this international perspective, persons have been commenting that, they came out for something and they got much more than what they had expected. And for somebody of your notoriety and status in the data protection sphere, to come out to an event and to be so willing to share is something that we do appreciate. Mr. Record, you are definitely a known force in data protection, and I do appreciate your relatable mechanism of giving information, as well as your presentation. It was very good. I'm sure that everyone was able to learn something from it, and I do appreciate your anecdotes, because honestly, this forum was mainly targeted towards young people, and you even being able to use the example of your children in the social media sense is something that we can all relate to. And that is something that we really have to be more mindful about. Who has our passwords? Who has our information currently? Where do we put our passwords? These things are very important. Mr. Nooks, thank you for coming out as well. And also thank you for directing us to even your company that does training in this area. So Mr. Record and Mr. Nooks had recommended their companies for persons who do have interest in this field. And I really do hope that the persons who are interested get up and try to get something done, because you don't want the train to leave you at the station. So, Mr. Nooks, thank you for the information that you had provided. Thank you for everything that you have done for us today. Mr. Wheatley, Dr. Wheatley, thank you for just giving us the government's perspective on the Data Protections Act. Thank you for just saying why Jamaicans in general need to get on board, why Jamaicans in general need to see this as something that is important, because honestly, we cannot be left behind. The entire world is moving forward. We just watched our brilliant athletes run past everybody. And with data protection and cybersecurity, we don't want to get left behind. We don't want to be in ninth place. So I'm definitely hoping that we all can get ourselves together and push forward the cause. When someone is sick, they go to the doctor. When somebody needs legal advice, they go to lawyers. I'm hoping that when persons need advice on data protection, they go to the actual persons that are real experts in the field and don't try to diagnose their problems by themselves. But we do practice proper habits. You heard the habits today. If anybody wants to check again, you can always log on to the YouTube and you can check the YouTube and get the information if you want. Subscribe to the channel. We have another one coming up on Wednesday. I hope you all turn up. And I'm going to hand over to our lovely, to our beautiful, to our exceptional co-hostess, Sharon Hilton.
All right, thank you very much, Nathaniel. And I have absolutely nothing to add to that, to your vote of thanks. I believe it was beautifully done. But I have a quick question, or I'm permitting Mr. Record the opportunity to give further details on a webinar that he had mentioned. So there's an upcoming Data Protection Act webinar, and the reality is this discussion about data protection and cybersecurity doesn't end with G2K. Or aim or purpose is to, sensitize, as Nathaniel would have said, or youth with regard to data security, and at large, the rest of Jamaica. So, Mr. Record, I know that you had mentioned that there's an upcoming webinar in September, and can you please provide us with a few more details regarding it?
Sharon, thank you very much. Yes. So ourselves and our business partners, we partner with an organization called Design Privacy. One of the things that we did, a number of customers came to us saying, look, guys, we have downloaded the act, we have read the act, we understand what's going on, but we need help. We can't do this thing by ourselves. Could you actually help us to become compliant? Not only compliant on the organizational measures, but compliant on the technical measures, which is all the IT security. So what we're doing, we've been doing a series of webinars the last year, earlier this year, and the next one is going to be on September 30th at 10 a.m. So if you click on the link, or just go to our Instagram page or on our website, it should be up by tomorrow, I think. But on Instagram page, in the bio, data protection as a service. What we're doing is helping people to become compliant by helping them to file. And so in this webinar coming up, we're explaining to you all the things that you need to do. Step 1, step 2, step right down to the 10 steps as to everything that you need to do to file to become compliant. And then we'll also explain, so we're telling you how to do it, and we're telling you what to do. And then we'll also explain that if you need help to do it, we can also help you to do it. Right? So that is coming up on September 30th, 10 a.m. It's a webinar, it's online. So yes, you can just register at our Instagram page on our website. And I have put the link in the YouTube chat. And I'll also put the link right here if I can. Hope that helped.
Thank you for that information. And as I close, I just say this one statement here. I'm sure none of us here watching would want to have a Facebook account without a password. So I'm just going to use this opportunity to just plug something right here. Why you wouldn't want to have a Facebook account without a password? Because you want protection. I'm just encouraging us all to go get vaccinated today.
Nice, Nathaniel, love it. Good stuff.
Yeah, man. Thank you.